Hello there. I'm Kevin Newman, one of the co-founders of GetFact, and my guest on this edition of the podcast is one of the country's top experts in the life and the story of Laura Secord. Now, for many of you, that will immediately hit your desire for some delicious chocolate or ice cream, but she, believe it or not, was a real person, one of the heroes of the War of 1812, which was actually the last time an American president had the notion that Canada would be better off as part of the United States. So only that president, Madison, sent troops north to try to get us to surrender. Now, it obviously failed because we're still here, and the T-shirt says it, and Laura Secord is a big reason why that's true. She provided critical, verified, and strategic information that she overheard some U.S. soldiers discussing. And she provided it to the British and First Nation soldiers that were allied in defense of what became Canada. And it's also who we named our AI fact checker, Laura, after, because we find ourselves once again in need of patriots to take on our newly aggressive neighbor. So my guest is Carolyn McCormick, who is president of the Friends of Laura Secord. She joins us from the area where Laura once lived, Niagara Falls, Ontario. Hey, how you doing, Carolyn?
Good. Actually, I'm in the Lake, Ontario. So, but close to Niagara Falls. But
All right. Same general area of the country, anyway.
It is.
She's more than simply an historical curiosity to you, right? You have a direct connection.
Oh, well, yeah. And Laura Secord was my great-great-great-grandmother. Although my parents were often said to me as a child, if I brought up how famous Laura was, they said, hey, it wasn't you that did the walk, it was Laura. So I want to remain humble as a direct descendant. And there are many other direct descendants, even in Ontario here. So we're all proud of our connection to Canada's heroine. And and because of our connection, when the War of 1812 commemorations were first beginning in this area around 2011, I was hearing things, and I checked with everybody, and nobody seemed to, be interested in. Nobody was doing anything for Canada's heroine.
Isn't that crazy? Because of all of the characters of that war, I mean, her name probably endures longer than anybody's.
Yeah, but many people just recognize her as the face and name on a box of candy. And but anyway, it made me kind of angry that maybe it was just because she was a mere woman that we felt strongly that we had to do something to make sure she got her due during that commemoration. And we worked hard to do so. We established the Laura Secord Legacy Trail. That was not easy. We built a bridge over 12 Mile Creek where she had crossed by way of a log. And then we had we didn't know what we were doing, but somehow we pulled together this commemorative event. We also thought we would check with the Canadian Mint and the Canada Post to see if we could get a new coin and stamp, which happened. So that was wonderful.
That's amazing.
And we even were fortunate to get a video from Charles, His Royal Highness Charles, the Prince of Wales at the time, now King.
Of course.
Because of his ancestors' connection to Laura Secord in 1860. So anyway, it was, and by the way, Valerie Pringle walked in our walk, and she brought along the Prime Minister's wife, Lorraine Harper, which was very cool. So anyway, we had a wonderful event and have had several walks since then, and but fortunately not every year like we'd like to, because we're just too busy.
Well, Pringle, of course, is an old friend of mine, and she put us together and said, she saw the Get Fact, that we named our AI fact checking bot after Laura, and she said, hey, I'm really glad to be talking. I think we need to remind people about the walk. You keep talking about this walk because It was, and I talked about it at the time where Laura was living with her husband. That area of what was then British North America was occupied by
Yes.
American troops.
Yes, it
And
was.
therefore, she was able to sort of overhear some strategic information that the troops were talking in the open about. And she
Mhm.
walked, 20 miles. What's that? Tell me
32
what
kil
that walk would have been like for her. And we're talking about it at exactly the same time of year when, the sun is up in Canada for the longest period of time. It
Mhm.
was a hard walk, wasn't
It
it?
was a hard walk. We think it took her about 16 hours. She would have left around dawn, and we've done research for many years, and we had many people involved with our group that are very knowledgeable about the trajectory of her trail and so on. But it would have been very dangerous. It's undeveloped territory. It was wilderness, basically, except a few small towns that was the Canada was barely settled at that time, so it would have been a tough go. It would have been dangerous. There would have been well, can you imagine the flies and the mosquitoes? But there were bear, cougar, snakes in the area. Somehow she avoided them, and as far as we know, but, it would have been very, very difficult, and especially, she didn't have a compass. She just sort of figured she had to go, like,
Yeah, follow
there.
the sun, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So
Well, and that
it
was also, I mean, she didn't necessarily know when she was crossing from enemy territory into friendly territory.
Mhm.
So she must have had a lot of fear for her own
Yeah.
life. And then
Mhm.
at one point, your group has done some really interesting new research into how the last part of that 20-mile or whatever that 2 times 6,
Mm.
anyway, that trek uh, did, she ran into some Mohawk fighters who were also a part of the
Yeah.
battle. Explain what that moment must have been like
Well,
and
it
was like.
it would have been a remarkable thing, and it was, John Tootla and John Warner, who were warriors under John Norton. I guess John was a very popular name at the time, so but it was about a mile or so from her destination. And would have seen her coming in, wondering, who is this woman alone, looking like she must have looked at that time
Oh yeah.
after 16 hours of schlepping through everything on one of the hottest days in recorded history. So,
Really. And I mean, long gowns and like, wow.
oh, yeah, and it had rained and rained and rained for prior to that, so it would have been mucky and awful, and so they said that she lost her shoe, which was probably just a slipper anyway, but that wouldn't have been surprising, but she came across these she encountered these warriors. She put her hands up as if to say, well, I hope they're allied with the
Yeah.
British,
I'll,
but
I'll surrender whoever you are.
yeah, 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 and when they realized she was a friend and that she had an important message, they escorted her the final distance to DQ House, where, the British outpost was which was her destination, and where she was able to, deliver her, fateful message to Lieutenant Fitzgibbon.
And what was
But
that
it's
message? Remind people.
Well, it was just that the enemy is coming, and they're coming, and they've got 600 warriors and cannons and all of that, and they want to get rid of that supply, uh, uh, storage area, and also Fitzgibbon, by the way, because he and his Green Tigers were out menacing and causing problems. A small contingent, like 45 or so, and but they were coming. Here was this large contingent of Americans coming to get it, and then they would have carried on and taken the Niagara Peninsula after that. So Laura knew it was important to warn of that. She realized how critical it would be. And in Queenston, where she lived, her husband was ill, could not make the walk. Most of the men were off fighting or were too ill or had been taken prisoners of war. So there
Mm.
weren't a lot of options. And
It was
she
women's work in that
knew,
kind of
she knew,
situation.
she knew she had to go
Yeah.
and in defense of this country. And but as I said, with it, when she met the warriors, when they realized she was a friend, they shook her hand. And 2 days, a day and a half later, First Nations warriors, not from that contingent, uh, were ambushed by First Nations warriors. And really, the victory there changed the course of the War of 1812. It was sort of the beginning of the end. And so,
It's like it's
and
like our
because,
it's like our it's like our Battle of Gettysburg. It's one of those points where, something happens and history pivots, on the
Mhm.
result of that. And if she hadn't told the British and their allies at the time, the First Nations
Yeah,
warriors, that there were 600 Americans about to battle them, they
yeah,
wouldn't
well,
have prepared probably
yeah,
as urgently and as forcefully as they
yes.
we did.
Yeah, and obviously, uh, when Fitzgibbon heard her message, he sent scouts out to alert other troops in the area about this impending attack. So they were prepared, and the Americans were certainly taken off guard with the ambush by First Nations warriors, and that's it's. The First Nations involvement, we realized at the very start of the Friends of Laura Secord how important their story is uh, in defining this country. I didn't know. I learned so much over the past number of years through our First Nations advisors, Tim Johnson, Darren McDermott, and others, Jim Hill, or Rick Hill, and Jim Hill. Um, but it was it was uh, the reason why we built the First Nations Peace Monument at the terminus of her trail to honor this major contribution, that honor their history and heritage and their great
And their
contribution to the.
contribution. I mean, as you say, if Laura hadn't made the trek and warned them, and if the First Nations hadn't been allied with the British troops, there weren't enough British troops on their own to take on the
No,
Americans, right?
no,
We would have lost, and they would
yes,
have kept marching to, the
yeah,
place I'm looking at right now, Toronto. It really was such a
yeah,
seminal moment in the history of our country.
yeah. And here it was, a woman, First Nations, kind of. So
Isn't that
that's
sweet? That's
it.
that's just
Yeah,
perfect for our times. Now, was Laura's, because she was a woman, was her contribution uh, respected automatically, or was there a fight over time to restore her importance in our history?
well, that's an interesting question. Laura didn't speak much about her walk. So in the early reports, you don't hear about that, um, because she still had family in the U.S. She had family everywhere. Didn't she didn't know if the Americans were leaving right then. She didn't know that there was going to be an end to the War of 1812. So she kept quiet to protect her friends and family. And but people knew about this, but really there was very little information out there until she needed a job, and she appealed to Lieutenant Fitzgibbon to provide a letter of stating that, yeah, she did do something. And so
Hmm.
it was like her resume. And so he provided her a letter substantiating what she did. And so those letters were preserved, thank goodness. So we were able to prove what she did. And, so and, but that's really was quiet until 1860, when the young Albert Edward, the Prince of Wales, 18 at the time, was in the Niagara area because of anniversary of the War of 1812. And he noticed Laura Secord as the sole female on the list of veterans. Uh,
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
So she
so
was
he was,
recognized as a veteran of the war.
yeah, well, she insisted that her name be put on that list. So she had a bit of fire in her,
She
but
had moxie. Isn't that good to know?
everybody agreed. And so he noticed her as the sole female. He went back. He showed that to his mom, Queen Victoria, and they sent her some coin to help her live the final years of her life.
Hmm.
And so it's that uh, grabbed the attention of newsmakers and so on, and
Hmm.
people such as yourself.
Yeah.
And
Well, that plus, I don't know if I've ever said this in public before, but my first job was actually at Laura Secord. I was a I was an ice cream scoop, and I lied about my age. I was 14, but my family needed me to make some money, so I lied about my age, and I worked at an ice cream scoop for Laura Secord. So my introduction to her was sort of that, that matronly cameo, in
yeah.
there. And then later, when I was a young reporter, I was the Queen's Park correspondent for one of the
Hmm.
television stations, and I
Hmm.
saw the portrait that it probably doesn't still hang, but it did at the time
Hmm.
at the Ontario Legislature of Laura Secord, and I thought she's a very handsome man, and
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
and I'll say the story, and because it leads to a question, which is like I was told that the artist was so pissed off at a man that had sat for him and hadn't paid for the portrait that he just pasted a bonnet on the man's face, put him in a dress, and claimed it was Laura Secord so he could get paid for the portrait.
Well, that's interesting. That's a news story. Okay, now we have something to
Check
add
that
to our.
out. Check that out. It's a
Uh,
terrible story because it's just so lacking in respect,
it's
for the
not.
woman herself. And I thought, well, they must have known what Laura looked like, but did anybody really know what Laura
No.
Secord looked like?
Well, we knew she had brown hair and brown eyes. I do know that if there was enough information posted about her about that, but no, we don't really know what she looks like. But everybody, and I even loved the first cameo of Laura Secord on the candy box. So it's nice to think, yeah, maybe she was actually the a young woman that posed for that was a member in the family, like a
Really? So she
her
was at
grand.
least a descendant of Laura Secord.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Well, Laura Secord keeps getting younger on the chocolate, so I mean, she would
yeah,
approve of that, I assume.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Do you guys? I mean, this is a rude question to ask, but I'm sure it's one that people must ask you. Do you get a cut of every chocolate? Does the family benefit at all from that
Oh,
association?
oh, I wish. Yeah. No, the Friends of Laura Secord is completely volunteer. Like, we're just such hardworking people that get nothing. But yeah, the Frank O'Connor, yeah, I think back in 1913, right after the Laura Secord centennial,
Hmm.
she was recognized then. A few women had early feminists had brought her name out of oblivion as an important female figure for Canada. And why not? Courage, determination, perseverance, fortitude, going the extra mile for your country. So it was wonderful. But Frank O'Connor was so inspired by her story that he wanted to name Laura Secord, use her name on his candy box. And it was my great grandfather, James Carthew, who agreed to do that. He was a lawyer. He, said, yeah, it's okay. Just keep her name alive. No, no benefit to the family financially ever, anytime. It was just keep the name alive. And it did.
Hmm.
It did help to keep her name alive. So,
And of course,
uh,
she came to mind when we were thinking about the place that we're in right now as a country. And I know your organization must wonder about this too. We face another American president who has this notion of manifest destiny that we should be one country in one continent, and has been not very polite about us
yeah,
lately. When you as a society, as friends of Laura Secord, think about what Canadians should know at this point in its history, what lesson do you hope they take?
well, I do with hope, and we feel it's important to resurrect her importance once again. She was an ordinary person that did something extraordinary, and at the risk of herself and her family, and she did it anyway because she loved this country, and she wanted to do what she can, and she did, and it made a difference, and it took, again, courage and determination and perseverance, and, wondering the whole time, "Am I gonna make it? Am I gonna make it in time?" And, perhaps thinking she'd never see her children again. She
Mhm.
was basically a spy in enemy-occupied territory. Some of the First Nations warriors were allied with the Americans, so you know, and
She
they
was
would have
gutsy. I
been
mean, I mean, the
Betsy.
lesson is, I
Yeah,
guess that you're saying is this is another opportunity to see what she did, and we are in a time when you might need to step up for your country,
you
when
might
you might
need
need
to
to do
go.
hard things.
You might need to go the extra mile for your country once again. So, uh, yeah, no, I think it's wonderful, what she continues to represent, how she continues to inspire people. And, because those qualities are timeless. And I hear from young girls quite often, I love Laura Secord. And how wonderful that they're
Mhm.
still inspired, you
Yeah.
know, and how wonderful all the people that would come to her walk because they love what she did. And, and speaking of that, the walk and the trail, what's cool, sort of segue here,
Mhm.
is that the Laura Secord Legacy Trail, thanks to Valerie Pringle, uh, is now part, since back then, since it was established, because Valerie was
She was
involved with
chairman
the
of
project.
the, Trans-Canada Trail for a very
Yeah.
long time and raised a
Yeah.
lot of money so that we have this amazing hiking trail that goes from one coast to the other right across the country.
Exactly, and how cool that the Laura Secord Legacy Trail is part of the Trans-Canada Trail, the trail that connects the entire country. So it's, they're a wonderful group, and, it was, we're very proud to be
Mhm.
part of that, remarkable trail.
You just gave me chills. I just had a little patriotic chill right there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I have to ask you finally, I mean, is it okay that we named our artificial intelligence bot after Laura Secord?
Well, why not? If she can help again in some way. I mean, we're all faced with all this missing information. And, you know, it's time that becomes opportunities for people to vet what they're reading and to try to uh, get that information clear. We don't want to perpetuate misinformation. So I think it's wonderful, and that Laura's out there
Hmm.
doing her thing.
Well,
So
and we were inspired because accurate, factual information can change the course of history if you seek it out.
yes,
And to us, that was the lesson of Laura that
yeah,
we have to return to a place where we believe witnesses, we believe each other,
yeah,
and we trust that some information is in fact.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So where
No,
can people find out more if they want to be if they want to be on the trail, if they want to visit the monuments that you guys have put together? Where can they go online to discover you guys and
Friends of
find out
Laura
more?
Secord, just Google Friends of Laura Secord or, Friends of Laura Secord.com. We're doing a overhaul on our website right now, but they'll be able to get, some good information. We're always adding to it, but it's a little in flux right now.
And
Uh,
if they want to make a contribution to keep her story living?
oh, please, yes. Yeah, there's a donate button, or they can go to Canada Helps, which is that wonderful uh, Canadian
Charity
group.
raising site. Yeah.
Yeah, charity
Canada
rate.
helps.
Yeah. So that's, been been helpful for us too. So,
Good.
yeah, if people want to donate, if people have any questions, they can contact us. We love getting,
And then they
calls
can
from
fact
people.
check it on Get Fact to make sure that the answer is right.
Yeah,
Let's both do
yeah.
commercials. Hey, listen, Carolyn, I have loved talking to you. I've learned so much. And
Oh, it's a
thank you
pleasure
for
to
all of your work and all the volunteers in keeping your great grandmother's story in front of Canadians, especially in the times that we're now in. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, she's important once again. Go the extra mile, everybody. Canada. Like Laura. Anyway, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Kevin, and good luck. And I think this Get Fact is going to be a really fun, great site.
It already is. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yes.
Appreciate it. And I'll
Okay.
tell Val you say hi.
I will do.
All
All
right.
right.
Take care. Bye
Take
bye.
care.